welcome to another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. I, of course, am Mr. Warren Hayes, and this is the podcast on which we are going to be talking about professional wrestling for a couple of hours right here on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes or on your favorite podcast application, wherever you may find yourself. Thank you very much for joining me this week, for allowing me into your environment. Look, if I may be so bold, since I'm already here, would you mind leaving a like here if you're watching this on YouTube, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify? All of these little things help out a tremendous deal, and it would be great to help you, for you to help me continue to grow the podcast a little bit. All these little things do help out, and that would be great. It would be great, especially since we've got some fun stuff to talk about here on the podcast tonight. Of course, I'm going to be reviewing the New Japan show that happened just a couple of days ago, the New Beginning USA show, New Japan's first show in the United States of 2026, and we're going to talk about AJ Styles. We got some closure there. We've got, guess what, Danhausen that we're going to be talking about. So, and just a couple of more, a few other bits and bobs here and there. So, BG, thank you. Look, we've got a good show. We've got some really interesting topics to go over. So let's get right to it. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Should we start by talking about Danhausen? Should we just get this out of the way? Should we just finish? Should we just talk about it and never speak of this again? Because the thing here, the thing that we all have to keep in mind, folks, is that no one is ever talking about Danhausen again. The Danhausen discourse on social media reached Killer Cross levels of it. I was so done with it. And then his debut arrives. And then then it perks me up. Then I'm like, okay, we've got a little meat on the bone here. Now we actually have something to talk about. But I think we all realize that from this point forward, there is, unless something completely unexpected happens, we are never speaking. Danhausen is never making news again, right? I think that's it, right? And he's probably going to show up on Raw tonight, or is he on SmackDown? I don't even care, quite frankly. But look, let's go to it. Let's do this. Let's do this the Warren Hayes way, just like I was raised to do. Okay. Let's read a nice little article from our boy Josh Nason over there in the Figure 4 Online Wrestling Observer. Okay. The boxed mystery was no longer a mystery. This was written on Saturday, right? On February 28th. Exactly. Danhausen, why do you know this stuff, Antox? Antox knows all of this dumb bullshit. I feel like my brain is already filled with enough dumb bullshit, but then there's people who like surpass me, and I'm almost jealous, quite frankly. The boxed mystery is no longer a mystery, as its contents were revealed to be Danhausen during Saturday's WWE Elimination Chamber. Raw GM Adam Pearce and SmackDown GM Nick Aldis brought the giant wooden crate out into the arena and opened it up before walking away, revealing a coffin inside. A group of females dressed as vampires then emerged, followed by the enigmatic Danhausen. He and the women then came to ringside, where he handed Michael Cole a jar of teeth. They then got into the ring before the lights went out and end the segment. Then we go, the aforementioned crate first appeared on Raw mid-February with a message on it not to open until February 28th. The 35-year-old posted a message to social media on Friday alluding to the freedom, while his profile was removed from the AEW roster page on Saturday. The move to WWE ends a multi-year run in AEW Ring of Honor that was marked by long periods of inactivity and frustration about that inactivity. Despite remaining under contract, he hasn't wrestled in AEW since December 2023, and Ring of Honor Since February 2024, his contract was reportedly set to expire before being extended against his wishes. It remains unclear if he fell out of favor and why he went unused. Okay, we're not watching the video. I'm not dealing with WWE breathing down my neck. We're not watching the clip. You've all seen it by now. First and foremost, first of all, I still don't understand how anyone thought that Chris Jericho could possibly be in a box. Look at what they did here. And I'm saying, not that they would have done the same thing with Chris Jericho. They wouldn't have had him come out of a coffin and have, girls dancing around him with, Monty Burns hands. He would have never come out of a crate. He's a fucking superstar. It's Chris Jericho. You don't need this kind of gimmickry. He just has to show up. Anyone who thought that Chris Jericho was going to be in the crate, like Matthew of Botchamania said earlier today on a post, and I thought it was interesting, has their mind tied up tighter than the cherry in Twin Peaks, than the cherry stem in Twin Peaks. I blew it, Matthew. So that's one thing. Look, he debuted. It was what it was. They went all out for some reason on Danhausen. They decided to have the dancing girls. They decided to have the pyro. They decided to just have him come in, do a segment and leave. For some reason, this is the creative that they came up with for, the mid-card meme wrestler extraordinaire that is Danhausen. And I don't necessarily mean that in a derogatory fashion. Not necessarily. It's just facts, Facts don't care about your feelings. Isn't that right? He says, wearing his left-leaning t-shirt. So the idea, but okay. So Danhausen, gets this huge production, music playing, choreography. He's hitting his timings. The music has all of his little catchphrases, the cursed and very nice, very evil. And then, gives the jar to Michael Cole, and it is an extremely awkward moment. And then he gets into the ring and the lights go out and he gets booed. The reaction from the Chicago crowd, who, mind you, should probably know more who Danhausen is than, fucking Des Moines, right? He came out, he did his thing, and the Chicago crowd was not impressed. They outright booed it. And I don't know why anyone is really surprised that people reacted that way, considering how he was presented. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay? This is not my thing. Yes, it is, Warren. What are you trying to say here? I don't think that this was intentional, but Danhausen was set up to fail here. Why are you treating this guy, like I said, a mid-card meme wrestler? Why are you treating this guy like a huge star, getting a bigger reveal introduction to the WWE universe than anyone else in recent memory? Powerhouse Hobbs didn't get that kind of reception, right? Didn't get the lights out and the segment, and then, you can head out and out now. Like, why are we treating this guy so special when he's looking the way he looks? He's a small guy, doesn't exactly have the poundage on him, right? Not exactly the type of person that you're used to seeing on World Wrestling Entertainment Television. And he comes, he does some awkward stuff. No one is quite sure what's going on because no one knows who he is. This is something that we had speculated. We talked about. I talked about it on Blue Sky. Everyone's been chatting about it. The question everyone was asking in the lead up to this is, how much will the WWE audience know? How much of the WWE audience will know who this guy is? And a lot of people's instincts, including mine, was probably not very much, because WWE fans are trained to think less of the independents, to be things that you shouldn't be necessarily paying attention to. If you want to say, oh, but he was in AEW and whatnot, he hadn't been in AEW over in easily 2 years, maybe even more. What did we say? 2023 was his last match. So over 2 years, hasn't been on AEW television, hasn't exactly been a big star to be, regardless. This is a guy who has a very strong, very vocal online presence, because that's where his fan base always has been. Because people who go to indie shows and, who were excited to see Danhausen and have a good time with the teeth and the curses and whatnot, were all people who were rather online as well, as far as their wrestling fandom goes. This is not the case with WWE fans. WWE fans will wait to be fed the information, and so on and so forth. So they had no idea who this guy was. And I think it's a very, very, I thought it was a very unfair way to debut him. I think they put a lot of pressure on the shoulders of a guy who is a bit player in wrestling. And now he has a hell of a hill to climb back up to get this audience to like him. You know how I would have debuted him? If Warren Hayes was if Warren Hayes was somehow, the in charge of booking for World Wrestling Entertainment, I would have had him show up, do the thing in the background where you have this weirdo walking around, doing the Monty Burns hands, and with his teeth and whatnot, and introduce the character. So he's just hanging around backstage. People are like, who's this weird guy? Maybe once in a while he gets a little quip in at the end of an interview segment backstage, or at the end of a segment backstage. Hey, are you very evil, very nice, or whatever the fuck he says, something to that effect, where instead of doing this, which is just shoving them down our throats in an energy that is not Danhausen in the least. Well, not in the least, but the level of production that was here is not Danhausen-esque. Instead of doing that, introduce him to the audience. Do this for a month, 2 months. It doesn't matter. It's WWE. They could have stretched this out for a full 6 months. And then people starting to get excited. Well, when is he going to wrestle? When is he going to wrestle? And then they see him wrestle and they're like, oh. Oh. Is that all? Is this all this is? But anyway. But you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say here, I think I'm being very fair. I think I'm being very charitable and fair in saying that I think Danhausen in this situation, I thought he was given a raw deal. I think he was given a raw deal. I don't think this is a debut that was beneficial to him. But now the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're going to have to deal with it. And I think his journey to get himself over with the WWE audience is going to be that much more difficult now moving forward. And I don't know why they did this. I have no idea why they decided to do this huge production and treat him like a megastar. Because this was a superstar entrance, folks. They didn't even give this kind of entrance to AJ Styles when he debuted at the Royal Rumble. Hell, they couldn't even put the camera on the entrance. They kept the camera on Roman the whole time. Cody Rhodes, when he came in, he got the big entrance with the music and the graphics and and the whole big Cody Rhodes production, right? Adrenaline in My Soul and all of that. He got the full Monty here. Who the fuck is Danhausen to get this, right? And I don't mean that necessarily in a disrespectful way. It's more like give him an entrance that will give him an entrance or a presentation to the company that will be in league with his role or the role that he had. If Danhausen was this megastar, if this was like Shinsuke Nakamura when he debuted on Maine, right? And they start, with the violins. Well, they didn't have the violinist when he debuted, but his theme song was awesome, and he do the lighting effects, and Shinsuke's very theatrical, so all of that, you're like, oh, fucking hell. But then you're like, yeah, this is Shinsuke Nakamura. It's one of the fucking top wrestlers on the planet. It's like one of the New Japan cornerstones. Yes, like this guy, you boost him. This is fucking Danhausen. He sells merch, I'm told. He's a t-shirt guy. Who cares? What is this? That's ultimately my issue. That I think they set him up to fail. I'm not saying that it's intentional. I'm just saying that they could have done this in a much different, simpler way. I don't know. WWE likes the comedy. They like the ha-has. They like doing like silly things. If all else fails, they'll send him to AAA, and he will get over in AAA. He will work. He will work out fine in AAA. WWE AAA, excuse me. Don't call it NXT Mexico. Now, as it pertains to the fact that he had been sidelined all this time and, was wanting to work, and yes, there was injury time, but he wasn't injured all this time and whatnot. Look, it's always a debate when these types of things happen, right? And hopefully I'm consistent on this. What does that mean? My thoughts are very simple, because I don't like people who say, well, you signed the contract, tough it out type of thing. I don't like that kind of stuff, because every contract, you can negotiate an exit out of any contract. That's life, folks. A contract is not a fucking, it's not fucking scripture and marble, blessed by the gods that you have to fulfill lest you get stricken with leprosy or something. That's not what a contract is. Contract is it's a fucking human construct. It's a legal document that you can, that in good faith, you can exit, you can break out of. Otherwise, look, otherwise people who work any type of job who has an employment contract, because, there's a lot of you probably have an employment contract. Does that mean you can't leave your job if you don't like it, if you're fed up, if you get a better offer somewhere? Does that mean you can't leave? Of course not. I have a contract at work that I re-sign every 3 years, but I have an out clause. You can always negotiate your way out, even if you don't have an out clause. A contract can be amended as long as both parties are in agreement to it. So, I don't like this mentality of, oh, well, you signed the contract, you signed the contract for 3 years, do the 3 years. So many fucking things can happen in 3 years at your job that maybe on day one you were thrilled, in year one you were thrilled, but by the end of year two, you're like, man, this place fucking sucks. There's so many things that can happen. So I don't like that mentality. It's a mentality that in a nutshell, and I think for people who have never worked, that have never worked with under a contract, I think that's the kind of mentality that's just like, that's boxed in. It's like, do your time, brother. And especially when it comes to pro wrestling, where, and I can't emphasize this enough, every professional wrestler has a shelf life. Athletically, physically, they all have a shelf life. None of them want to be sitting around being wasted away, in whatever place in their career they are, at the onset of their career, in the prime of their career, in the twilight years of their career. Who cares? No one wants to be sitting around. No wrestler wants to be sitting around doing nothing because they're forced to do nothing. Because on top of that, these individuals all understand that they are companies in and about themselves. They're brands, right? Don't forget all of these contracts that AEW and WWE sign. All of these wrestlers, they're all supposed to be independent contractors. Never forget that first, but we'll see how deep we have to go into that discussion, but we know that's a whole other can of worms. The wrestler is a brand and understands that if, as a performer, as someone who has to depend on a media presence, if they can't get out there, they are ultimately hurting their bottom line, or their bottom line is getting hurt, should put it that way. And their bottom line is getting hurt, and maybe even hurts future possibilities as well for employment elsewhere if they cannot market themselves well, if they cannot turn themselves into a desired property that another company would gladly snatch up once they become available, right? So I can understand that these wrestlers sitting around doing jack shit and don't want to do that. Plus, they're all competitive. Every wrestler is competitive. These are competitors. And unless you've done sports, unless you're an athlete, I think this is something that's hard to connect with. I'm no athlete, okay, but I've been around athletes and people who are high performance minded in my past to understand the type of mentality that they have, where it's like these are all people who detest sitting around doing nothing. All of us, people like us, we fucking slobs sitting around going, he's getting paid to stay at home to do nothing. That's a dream job. For us fucking morons, sure. but for people who have athletics, competition in their blood, it's the worst possible scenario. They don't want this. So all that being said, if Danhausen wanted out of his contract, Tony Khan should have cut bait and let him go, like he did with Rey Fenix, like he did with Ricky Starks. Just fine, go off and shine, do whatever you need to do, right? And I really do believe that. Now, are there reasons why Tony Khan decided to where Tony Khan decided to keep him? Probably. And here's the thing, right? It is very, very probable that there are reasons why Danhausen wasn't released beforehand. Probably more than just, well, you have to sit out the rest of your contract. There is precedent in this company where Tony Khan has released people from their contract before their term came up. He has done this. So why didn't he do it with Danhausen? What's the issue with Danhausen? Danhausen, vague posting online, how frustrated he's not being able to do anything. Why isn't Tony just cutting bait? Maybe there were very good reasons. They're just not out there. We don't know, right? As a general population, we don't know. And maybe we will never know. Maybe it'll come out at some point. Maybe, it's the kind of thing, so maybe at some point the news will start circulating. But if I were to bet some money on this, I think there was something else going on. I think there was something that happened that pissed off Tony Khan to the point of saying this guy is sitting at home until his contract is done. And I am not releasing him. I'm not letting him go to WWE. And there's a reason for this. So that's where I would be putting my money if I were a betting man. I would put my money on that. I am not a betting man, and this is just for entertainment purposes only. This is not real financial advice. So that's the long and short of it. There was no look there. Just to complete that idea, though, there is a reason why Tony Khan held on to him, because there was no other reason to. what would have been the reason to? Lower mid-card comedy act, meme wrestler. What the fuck are you doing sitting on this guy, making sure that he doesn't go anywhere? What the fuck? You're not even producing merch anyway, like this stellar merch, right? That everyone keeps telling us. Oh yes, the merch. He's such a great merch man. He sells so much of the merch. Remember that one year he out-merched CM Punk? You know, the merch argument is not the catch-all. It's not the gotcha a lot of people think it is, right? It's like, oh, well, he was a big merch guy. Still wasn't on TV. Still didn't make money on TV. Still wasn't an attraction even when he was on TV. When you have to default to, oh, well, he sold a lot of merch. You're like, okay. So what are you admitting right now? What are you admitting? I remember, and again, like no disrespect and I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead, but Bray Wyatt, when he was doing when he came back and started doing the Firefly Funhouse at first, right? And the Fiend stuff and all of that. That's what everyone would say. Oh, Bray, he's a big merch. He pushes all sorts of merch. He sells all sorts of merch. But then you're like, yeah, but Bray's a very average pro wrestler. He just doesn't make it happen in the ring. It's all theatrics. It's, it's goofiness. It's the building turning red. It's people getting set on fire. It's the Fiend. It's all of that stuff, right? I don't think it's the gotcha a lot of people think it is, because I think by doing the merch argument, you're sort of proving a point. It's like, oh, is this all? And how much merch can he be pushing? How much merch is he making? Sorry, let me say that again. How much money is he making through his merch to justify the salary you're paying him? And that's what a lot of people don't seem to understand. I don't think there's a wrestler on planet Earth today who justifies their salary based only on the amount of merchandise they sell. I think it can be part of it, but this is not a Hulkamania type of situation. This is not an Austin 316 type of situation. He might sell a lot of merch, but is it enough to say, yes, let's continue paying this guy this much every year? Because don't forget, he was likely getting his salary plus residuals from all the merchandise. You know what I mean? The merch argument is full of holes, and it's not the surprise gotcha that people seem to think it is. Ultimately, and this is, again, like I said, this is probably going to be the last time we ever talk about Danhausen, or at least for a long fucking time, because now he's on WWE and he's going to be relegated to the lower card, where he's going to do stupid shit and he's going to run into Chelsea Green and they're going to do goofy skits together and they're going to set up a match with him against Mr. Iguana, and Mr. Iguana is going to carry him to a good match because Mr. Iguana is a better wrestler a much better wrestler than Danhausen. And he's just going to flounder and he's going to do things, and we are never going to speak of him until something surprising happens, until his contract situation changes. Those are the only times we're going to be talking about Danhausen. On this podcast, I'm convinced. I would be utterly, utterly shocked to the gills if we sit around here and like every week there's more Danhausen to talk about. So there you go. I don't know what else there is to add. I feel like I've touched on pretty much every possible Danhausen topic as it stands right now. If we do the too long didn't read situation here, this is how it goes. Danhausen was done dirty with his entrance. It was way above his pay grade. So that's why he got booed. He's going to be, a lower mid-card comedy act. And he should have been released from his contract in AEW Tony Khan should have just let him go. But there was a reason why there was a reason why Tony decided to bench him, and I don't know what that is. I did see people say, "Oh, well, it's because of his ties to CM Punk, because he's CM Punk's buddy." I'm like, and to be clear, that is an incomprehensible argument. Completely incomprehensible, because there's all sorts of existing examples of former CM Punk, former members of the Punk camp who did not receive the same type of treatment from Danhausen. FTR is an excellent example. Brody King, Ricky Starks. Well, no, I guess Ricky is more of a scratch that, but Powerhouse Hobbs, scratch Ricky Starks. It was more of he's a Cody guy. I apologize, but Powerhouse Hobbs was a Phil guy. So no, like I don't think the Phil Brooks connection had anything to do with Tony Khan having Danhausen sit. Trust me, this is what my gut tells me, folks. There was something else. We don't know exactly what it is. There's something else. There's a reason why Tony ultimately punished him for that. I don't know what it is. I couldn't tell you what it is. We can all just speculate at this point. There was resolution in regards to AJ Styles and his positioning, his future between WWE and AEW. All this happened while I took a break from streaming last week, of course. So, I want to wrap this up because we did talk about it on the podcast. We did talk about it on stream. So I want to be able to give closure to this, or at least as much closure as we can have as it stands right now. We'll talk about it as we go along here. But maybe for some of you like, oh, this is so old, Warren. I haven't talked about it. It's my fucking show. It's my fucking stream. I'll talk with whatever the hell I want. So last week, it was a little after the Monday Night Raw farewell to AJ Styles there in Atlanta, where the Undertaker came out to announce to AJ Styles that he was going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? You got Justin Barrasso here, who wrote an article about it. I guess this was the next day, titled AJ Styles is headed to the WWE Hall of Fame. I'm going to read this really quickly. There's a lot of things that are going to be very obvious, but there's a little something in this article here I want to point out here. But it'll give us the full context that we need. Because right up until that point, right up until the Monday Night Raw show, it was still very much up in the air as, in regards to what was AJ Styles' next steps. What AJ Styles' next steps were going to be. AJ Styles officially announced his retirement last night on Raw. So yes, it was the next day. Unlike his last match against Gunther at the Royal Rumble, this time Styles left his gloves in the ring, symbolizing the end of his career. This was everything the farewell at the Rumble was not. Styles thanked his fan base, his family, and his peers for an unforgettable career. In an exceptional tribute, there was a video package with highlights from WWE and TNA, as well as recognition from Styles of some of Styles' opponents from long ago, like Abyss, Petey Williams, and Frankie Kazarian. Before celebrating with the roster in the ring, Styles was also able to share the moment with his wife and children. As for why now is the time to retire, Styles explained it is necessary for him to take on a new role as a full-time dad. So in his home state of Georgia, Styles announced the end of his career. That's when the lights went out and the Undertaker arrived before a boneyard rematch could be announced. Oh, Jesus Christ, Justin. Taker offered Styles a spot in this year's WWE Hall of Fame. Of course, Styles accepted. Speaking with people in WWE, there are those who believe that Styles was genuinely unaware that was going to happen, and a smaller camp who think he was tipped off that something of the sort was brewing. But make no mistake about it, Styles is honored to go into the Hall of Fame. The timing, however, does feel rushed. Essentially, what he implies in his article later on is that there are people who the smaller camp that he mentioned, who believe that WWE was aware that AEW was throwing, everything but the kitchen sink at AJ Styles to get him to come over to join AEW and wrestle a bit. This same small camp that also believed that who believed that he was tipped off to something of this, that the smaller camp who thinks he was tipped off that something of the sort was brewing, because then he would have been told by whoever was involved in the negotiations, say, well, look, we're going to offer you this plus a spot in the Hall of Fame so that you don't go to AEW type of thing, right? So that was the basis. That was the thing. So everyone was like, oh, he's going to the Hall of Fame, so he's very likely not going to head to AEW if he's about to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. By the way, just before we move on, DGMC with a very generous super chat. Thank you very much, DGMC. I appreciate it. I never got the appeal of AJ going to AEW even back in 2019. The company never needed him, and he always had a post-career spot in WWE waiting for him. Why risk it for dream matches? He's done enough. Oh, wrestlers are weird. But I think the dream matches, I think there's something there to the dream matches. And let's say you come in, well, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but let's say you get offered a proper part-timer schedule, right? Where it's just like, nah, you fly in, once every 2 months, you do a couple of weeks on TV and a pay-per-view, and then you go home for a couple of months, that kind of situation. I don't necessarily want AJ Styles running up and down the title picture in AEW. That's probably not what I want. What I want out of AJ Styles in AEW is AJ Styles versus Will Ospreay. That's what I want. Just to get it out of my system. The rest is ancillary. But not looking for the big AJ Styles work rate run. I want him to wrestle the guys that he inspired, essentially. Anyway, let's move on. As Justin Barrasso was putting this article out, AJ Styles went on to his buddy's podcast, The Talkin' Shop, with Machine Gunka and what's his name? Big Dog Gallows. He was there to address rumors about him going to WWE and his future in going to AEW and his future in WWE. So speaking on Talkin' Shop Live, Styles addressed the rumors of WWE possibly inducting him into the Hall of Fame to stop him from joining AEW. And here's the quote here. Let me give you something to talk about. So everybody wants to say, oh, WWE put AJ Styles in the Hall of Fame so that he couldn't go to AEW. Guys, I am retired from wrestling in the ring. Like, that's all this is. I make my own choices. I make my own decisions. I was ready. He further explained that he was on the verge of staying on the table for too long and wanted to beat the house, which is why he did, which he did by hanging up his boots. Styles, 48, stepped down from a decades-long pro wrestling career that began in 1998 and now finished in 2026. Styles noted that he will still be working with WWE in the future, shutting down rumors about his AEW jump. Here's the other quote. I am still going to be working with WWE. That's not going to change. I have these dreams of helping out young talent. If somebody is not ready once they get there, it's my job to hopefully help them get to that point where they can do it and they are confident when they step into a WWE ring. being able to help with that is a blessing. So he flat out says, hey, guys, I'm done wrestling. I have an offer from WWE to help backstage. I'm done. And look, shortly thereafter, PW insider Mike Johnson reported that Styles and WWE came to an agreement where he will indeed have some kind of backstage role, where he's going to do something backstage. He's been signed to that contract to do it. So what this feels like to me, right, is that WWE did indeed know that there was massive interest from AEW, and that they turned around and they just threw everything they had to be able to keep AJ Styles with the company. Because could you imagine, just think about it for a second, could you imagine how much the WWE would have absolutely hated for a top star performer like AJ Styles, who's got legitimate buzz, that the wrestling world would be excited about the idea of him testing out free agency and maybe going somewhere else and trying something new. Could you imagine if he left and showed up in AEW during the road to WrestleMania? No one in WWE would have liked that. This is something that I have no trouble believing that they did everything in their power to avoid that from happening, to keep that from happening, I should say. To avoid doing that, to keep that from happening. Thank you for the grammar lesson there, Warren. You're very welcome. Wrestling retirements. Am I right, fellas? We know what retirements in wrestling are. We know what they mean. We know what it's all about, right? Terry Funk, Ric Flair, the list goes up and down, right? And he's going on a podcast and he's saying definitively, right? He's saying very, very definitively, hey, I'm not wrestling anymore. Listen, I'm done. I'm not doing it. And he goes and he gives this definitive statement that he's not wrestling anymore on his buddy's podcast, his pals, his friends. He goes on their podcast. Two guys who also just happen to be two massive fucking workers. Like two well-known workers on top of that. I don't know. I don't want to give the impression that I'm suddenly thinking that AJ Styles is that I'm not believing what he's saying. I'm not sure he's not going to wrestle again. When he walked out of the Royal Rumble and all of that, I was like, he's done. He's done. He's done with WWE. He's going to go to AEW. I legitimately thought that was going to happen. But I really do think, like, in the meantime, WWE just wisened up. They realized what was going on. Maybe AJ went to them, and with his AEW offer in hand and said, hey, this is what these guys are offering me, which I hope he did, quite frankly. I hope that's what he did. It's a very plausible scenario. And then they threw everything they could at him. They gave him everything. That's how I think it came down, and then threw in the Hall of Fame thing. Now, to be honest, okay, and I think that just because the retirement thing was announced a little haphazardly, like 1 week before the Atlanta thing, right? I thought that I think it adds credence to the theory that I have that WWE just started throwing everything at him to try and keep him, allow him to stay, right? To get him to stay, I should say. I think that's what that was. Because otherwise, you would have started promoting this a couple of weeks in advance. You would have probably wanted to get, more tickets moving. Maybe get some people from out of town to make a date for it, right? They literally announced it a week before. It's like, next week on Raw, we're saying goodbye to AJ Styles. And this was like, what, 2 weeks after the Rumble that they announced it? So it's like, nah, this all came together a little last minute, all sort of a way to counter what AEW was offering and to give, the send-off and whatnot. But the send-off, what it ends up doing, what the send-off ends up doing, let's say AJ Styles does wrestle again. If he decides to do it again, the kind of send-off that he got makes it more difficult for him to just like go and slide into AEW and start off something new there without looking like an asshole, without looking like the heel in this circumstance. Don't you think? Because let's say he does this and maybe next year, he's going to AEW for a match or two, right? What are people going to say? What are his fans going to think? What are WWE fans going to think? Oh, this fucking liar. They're going to turn on him. What a fucking liar. He's, whatever. There's a little bit of public perception. There's a bit of a little public perception war going on here that I'm sure is not lost on WWE, where they're like, well, listen, we're going to do this. And, and if AJ Styles does indeed decide to wrestle again, well, and he doesn't do it in WWE, more importantly, well, he's going to look like the jackass. He's going to look like the asshole. And that's all there is to it. Kind of thing. Yeah, he's going to come across as ungrateful. Exactly. So, is he going to wrestle again? I don't know. I'm not so sure anymore. I'm really not all that sure anymore as to whether or not he's going to wrestle again. I was a lot more confident that he was going to go that he was heading to AEW. Because holy smokes, right? They had him, we had the rumors going around, right? You had Andrew Zarian, right? On Twitter, who was, talking about, the main event and the main event situation in AEW is going to be phenomenal this year, right? And all that kind of stuff. And then you had CM Punk, who was on it, who did an interview and was asked, AJ Styles' retirement, do you really think he's done? He's like, that's a private conversation that I had with AJ and I'm not going to talk about it. There was all this stuff going around before the Royal Rumble and everyone was very curious around and after the Royal Rumble, right? Before the retirement, before the retirement Raw. And, there was just a lot of stuff going around, a lot of talk. And I was feeling pretty good about it. Even AEW wrestlers were being vague about it, right? I was like, oh shit, there's something going down. But I am so convinced that WWE just threw so much shit at him. They just threw so much at him that he just was like, okay, I'll stay then. And I don't even think it's a question of loyalty, right? Because this is another attribute that we have bestowed upon AJ Styles as well, that he's very loyal. And I think that is truly part of his personality, because you wouldn't have stayed, no one in their right mind would have stayed that long with total nonstop action if there wasn't a sense of loyalty there. But his loyalty had a limit. Right? When he left in 2013, never forget, he decided to hit the bricks because they were lowballing him. Because they were like, no, you're going to take a pay cut on your next, I don't know if it was a pay cut, but you're not going to get as big a raise. They were legitimately lowballing him. And he was like, well, fuck you guys. And then he went to New Japan and then everything changed for him. Then he became an international star. Then everything was elevated from that point on. It was the best movies done in his career. So if WWE had lowballed him, at the very least, there is a reasonable expectation, because there is precedent, that he would have just like peaced out. It's like, okay, is this all you're going to offer me? Okay, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you. I'm out of here, because there is precedent. At the very least, there was that happened. I'm perplexed. I'm perplexed at exactly what happened. Of course, that's why I always come back to WWE must have just offered him the moon and back. But then again, we don't even know what they offered. We don't know, we don't know how much money. Mike Johnson didn't talk. Well, we never know the money amounts, but oftentimes we'll get the duration of a contract. And Mike Johnson didn't report anything. And that's suspicious. That's a little weird, because what is the length of the contract? Is it going to be done like on May 30th? Is it for a year? Is it for 2 years? How long are they locking him down? Is it really a long-term thing, or is it, a short-term thing that they decided to come up with to keep AJ Styles from jumping to All Elite Wrestling and gain and sort of shift some momentum away from the WrestleMania season? We honestly don't know. And I think it's a little suspicious. I think that's the thing that we sort of have to lean into here. And maybe it is a thing for a couple of months just to make sure AEW doesn't get their hands on him. And maybe after he's done, it's like, you know what? I'm gonna sit around at home. I'm gonna be with my kids. I'm gonna be a dad, just like he said. I'm gonna be a father. I'm gonna look after my kids properly. And that might be okay, right? That might be fine, because it's been talked about recently. I think a lot of people seem to have forgotten that, AJ Styles is not a guy who grew up watching wrestling and had all these aspirations to be, have a main event moment at WrestleMania. Like he wasn't one of those. This is a guy who started wrestling as an adult, got into it as an adult. It just so happened he was a natural at it. It was like, I think I'm good at this. And he decided to make a job out of it. He didn't necessarily have like this deep connection to pro wrestling. And you'll never hear AJ Styles, talk about all the tape that he watched from back in the day and so on and so forth. That's just not him. So, maybe this is all this has been about. Or it's just like, I will go with whoever gives me the most money for the least amount of work, which is absolutely fair at this stage of his career. If he's really intent on retiring, makes perfect sense. But I'm telling you, I can't help but think that it probably got hairy as far as negotiations go, and he was probably able to leverage AEW and WWE against each other, and he ended up with a deal that made him happy, and good for him. Good for him. Good for him if he's going to get paid without any extraneous effort. If he's going to work with younger guys and gals coming up, and feels like he'll be able to make a difference, that's tremendous. Good for him. But look, the little nagging detail that I still can't get rid of is the fact that we don't know how long this deal is. We just don't know. Since that has not been reported, that is the thing that sort of makes me scratch my chin and go, It could be for a while, or it could be for it could be short term. We just don't know. So I guess the book is closed for now. I'm sure Tony Khan is upset that he has been unable in this circumstance to secure AJ Styles. I'm sure that eats him alive. And you should be pretty confident that whenever AJ Styles becomes a free agent once again, you can rest assured that Tony Khan is going to make another huge play to sign AJ Styles. That I think you can rest assured that's going to happen. But in the meantime, Enjoy your retirement, Alan. Hope it's a good one. All right, it is time to review New Japan Pro Wrestling's The New Beginning USA show that happened on February 27, 2026, over there in scenic Trenton, New Jersey, at the Cure Insurance Arena. Cure, all caps, just like Kenta or Oscar. Anyway, 2,605 people showed up for this show. A show that overall I thought was good. I thought this was a good show. It's one of these shows I feel like was really bookended by truly excellent stuff. And there was other things happening in the middle, which your mileage will vary on, right? Where there's things that I thought were just outright soft, things that I thought were not turning out great that turned out to be pretty good, But like the true excellence that happened on this New Beginning show, it really did happen on both ends of the show. Truly at the beginning and then towards the end and at the end. That's how I kind of feel about the show. Like if someone were to tell me, look, I'm just going to watch what's really great and forget the rest, I'd be like, sure, absolutely. Unless you want to be, a completionist and watch everyone's, let's say you're a Konosuke Takeshita completionist and you have to see everything he does and you especially have to see his title wins. Well, then I'm like, okay, well, sure, go right ahead. Knock yourself out type of thing. That's fine. But this is a show that I can easily tell you that you will, I believe you will enjoy, right? I thought this was, like I said, good overall, despite the fact that there's some spots which I thought were really soft. There was nothing bad. There was nothing outright terrible on this show, right? Anything that just where you're just ramming your head against the wall where you're like, what the hell am I doing with my life? So, if you have the 3 hour-ish time frame to spare, it's overly complicated for nothing. If you got 3 hours to spare or so, go ahead and watch it, right? But if you really want to focus on the truly excellent parts of the show, well, then you've got 3 matches to stuff down your gullet, in my opinion, and we're going to get into all of this, into this New Beginning USA show, which, let's point this out. I think we have to mention this from the get-go. New Beginning USA 2026, New Japan Pro Wrestling, not a New Japan Strong show. None of that branding on the official mentions of the show. Sure, you had the logo in the middle of the ring, right? When the show started, it was like, oh, well, there you go. There's the connection to Strong. But otherwise, we had pointed this out when they first announced the show, and as we were getting closer, no mention of the Strong brand at all, which is something that I had heard that New Japan wanted to do away with the branding for their upcoming US shows. And first and foremost, if we go back a couple of months when we first started talking about New Japan and the new year and what they were going to do in the United States, we had been talking about how New Japan wanted to reduce the number of shows that they did in the United States because I'm convinced that some of the last few shows that they were doing, there was no way that they were profitable, right? There was no way that they were profitable. And I think one of the reasons that these shows, that these New Japan shows, one of the reasons that they had difficulty making money, drawing people to these shows, was because of the Strong branding. Because I think throughout the years, the Strong branding became synonymous with the New Japan B show, with the B team, as opposed to coming to see a New Japan show and seeing all the stars, right? If you recall, years ago, before they started branding the shows as Strong shows, you could anticipate to see Kazuchika Okada. You could be expecting to see Hiroshi Tanahashi, Will Ospreay, Tomohiro Ishii. You'd get all the people that you love to see with your New Japan World subscription. Those are the stars who would show up. But then you'd flip this around. and then you'd get, with the strong branding, and then it's like, well, who are we getting? Well, we're getting Fred Rosser. We're getting, Filthy Tom Lawler. We're getting the West Coast Wrecking Crew. No disrespect to any of those gentlemen, of course, but it's not exactly who you're, the DKC, it's like, again, no disrespect. It's just, these are not the people these are not the people that are making you tune in and watch New Japan in the first place. These are the American guys. These are, the American guys who end up on these shows and who are in, mid-card spots, So to a degree, everyone sort of shrugs and goes, well, why am I going to a New Japan Strong show when I'm not even sure the stars are going to show up? And then when they finally do release the card, and none of the really, and it's not a card that is filled with the stars of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then you're like, well, what is this? What am I coming to watch? So I think that ultimately the strong branding ended up being synonymous with, the B team, call it what you want, the developmental, the side brand, however you want to call it. That's how it became in the perception that's what it became in the perception of fans, is what I'm trying to say. And people just stopped buying tickets. Now they turn around here and and this is 100% branded as a New Japan, an NJPW show, and they're bringing in the big guns, right? They're bringing in the big guys. They're bringing in the champion, right? We're not pretending here. We're bringing in Yota Tsuji to this card here. We're bringing in El Desperado, who's a fan favorite. You got Oleg Boltin coming across for his first match ever in the United States. So, you got the Knockout Bros who are hot at the moment. So we're not just like filling this show up with secondary with secondary talent or the strong brand people. We're really going in with the stars of New Japan, the people who are who you want to see. Now, on the flip side, if you wanted to call this a co-branded show with AEW, I wouldn't have an issue with that, right? Because look, you've got Konosuke Takeshita, who of course has the double contract situation, but you've got Ricochet, who's on the show, right? You've got the Gates of Agony, who are wrestling in the tag team match. You've got Athena, who's there as well. You've got Andrade, and again, Andrade is a guy who has a bit of a wibbly wobbly situation. So again, if you wanted to say, well, Warren, he is a New Japan guy, and I agree. That's fine, but he's also an AEW guy. So at the very least, he's got a very strong association with AEW. I think that's fair. That's a fair way of putting it. Whichever way you slice it, you end up with a show that has a lot of faces that are very much associated with All Elite Wrestling. And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, especially if it creates situations that you might not get to see regularly in New Japan or in AEW, right? But this also adds to my argument that I've been doing for the past couple of years, that the Forbidden Door, is not as special as it was, in the past, because we have these shows with the crossover between both promotions fairly regularly now. So like what is the purpose of Forbidden Door? But that's a whole other discussion for a whole other time. I don't want to go down that hole today. We want to talk about this specific show here. So if you look at this show and you say to yourself, well, this is all just like, you look at this show and it's like, well, it's a good balance between the two. If you were looking for more New Japan matches, if you were hankering for more matches like Oleg Boltin versus Tomohiro Ishii, right? Which is straight up two New Japan guys. Well, again, Tomohiro Ishii has an association with AEW, but I think in this circumstance, people will associate Tomohiro Ishii more to New Japan than they do with AEW for multiple reasons, if only because his career has spanned New Japan forever, right? So, I think there's that exists in that circumstance. So, if you were hankering for like a true New Japan card here, well, you probably were smacking your lips going, I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure this is what I want. But what we ended up with was, again, I thought a good little show. Not without its faults, but the stuff that was the stuff that worked here, the stuff that was good was even excellent. And I think this is how I want to approach the review. I think I want to take the stuff that I really like, the 3 matches that I really like, start with that, and then we'll just, breeze through the rest of the card, because there's a lot of stuff I don't have many thoughts on, but I think that, like, on the flip side, there's a little more juice on the bone, meat on the bone. I mean, if you cook the meat properly, like, your meat that is on the bone could be juicy, right? But you can't just have like juice on the bone. That doesn't make any sense, because it would just drip off. It would just, nothing to catch the juice on the bone. The bone is very sleek. It's round, just slides off. So it was, it's not a good analogy. Like, maybe sometimes, I can mess up on an analogy and be like, this also works, but this doesn't work. You can't have juice on the bone. So, so there's more meat on the bone to as far as discussion and talking points with these with the 3 matches that I really liked, as opposed to the rest, which I feel we might breeze through them a little faster. So why don't we go right ahead, go to the top of the card, and start right there with the IWGP Global Heavyweight title, successfully defended by Yota Tsuji against Andrade El Idolo. This was excellent. This was such a good main event. It was just incredible stuff from both guys. Well put together, strong, great exchanges, terrific energy from both that really built to a really, really fun climax. At the start of the match, I was sort of wondering, I was curious because, I was sort of thinking, like, Tsuji might actually be losing the title here, because it was getting a lot of offense in. And a lot of times in New Japan match structures, the person, and this is not always the case, but a lot of the time, the guy, if there's a guy within the first like act of the first half, let's say, of the match, who is getting a lot of offense in over the other guy, especially if the guy is a babyface, right? The guy on the offense, there's a fair chance that person is losing. Like, your chances of that person losing then grow exponentially. And I kind of felt like we were going down that route, but then Andrade got in control for a while and really took over and was a thrill to watch. I thought these guys had really good chemistry. I thought it worked really, really well. I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe the little lucha inspiration here. Of course, Yota Tsuji, having done his excursion in CMLL and had, still exhibits some of that style in what he does. I feel he even brings it out a little more when he's in North America. When he comes into North America, then he sort of breaks out some of the old lucha stuff that he knows that he doesn't really bring out when he's in Japan. So he did it again on this show here with that Guerrero special that he did. Again, is something that that is not typically part of the Yota Tsuji Japanese arsenal, but you got to appreciate the effort that was put in here and the moves that they were landing on each other. They were doing destroyers and the hammerlock DDTs and that double underhook flipping pile driver that Andrade did. And I was like, holy smokes, what the hell was that? Like, that's something I haven't seen that very often, and that ruled. And Andrade towards the end, he's fighting back and he's kicking out of the He's kicking out of the Gene Blaster at the end. So what does Yota Tsuji do? He goes back to basics. Slaps on the Boston Crab, and Andrade taps. And I look, I thought the finish was extremely cool. And I will always appreciate a wrestler actually tapping out as opposed to, passing out and all this stuff, which happens so often, I find, in pro wrestling, particularly in American pro wrestling. It's just like, the guy is just going to fall asleep, because, and then it's kind of to protect them, to show that they never really tapped. They just gave up. They passed out due to the pain or whatever. And I'm like, who passes out to a Boston Crab? It's like passing out to a sharpshooter. What important arteries are you cranking down on? Are you clasping that are preventing essential airflow or blood flow, to the brain or whatnot? And you know what I mean? It's a little weird, but here, so I appreciated the ending, the finish to the match, and Yota Tsuji once again, going back to the Boston Crab, which he has used to win big matches before. I dug it. I like it. It all makes sense. It connects. It's a good finish to an excellent match. I thought these guys worked extremely well together. And look, let's start by talking about Andrade. He's truly been excellent since finally coming back into the world of professional wrestling. Right now that all of the nastiness with WWE is done, look, even myself, a guy who is, I am not as sold on Andrade as a lot of people are. In fact, I'm a guy who keeps him at arm's length for multiple reasons, right? Even I have to look at what he's been doing and admit that he has legitimately been excellent. Since he came back, his motivation's there. He's into it. I find he looks more the part of a top guy than he has in previous years. For some reason, like, his charisma is just pouring off the screen. He's motivated. He's into it, right? And that's what you want with Andrade, because the opposite can also happen, right? And we know that what an unmotivated, frustrated Andrade looks like, and what he can do, and what he can sound like, and so on and so forth. What all of that entails, and that's why I still hold him at arm's length. I'm excited with the work that he does. Right. I'm just wondering how much can a tiger truly change his stripes? That's the question that I ask myself when I think about Andrade, because he has every reason to be motivated right now, right? Of course he's going to give effort and show that he's into it, because he's right now in AEW. He is being booked against the top guys of the company. Not only booked against them, he's beating them. He's defeated Kenny Omega. He's defeated Swerve Strickland. His whole gimmick is, having a girl at ringside, fawn over him, give him kisses and paw him, and be, that's his whole thing. So of course he's motivated. Why wouldn't you be? You're in the ring. You're in the promotion, and you're beating some of the top guys in the company, and then your ringside shtick, your gimmick is that women can't keep their hands off of you. So of course you're going to be motivated. Now the real test is going to happen when Andrade will not be, in this type of push, when he's no longer fighting the Kenny Omegas, the Swerve Stricklands, the Hangman Adam Pages, the Will Ospreys, the MJFs. When he's going to go back, when I say when he's going to go back, maybe it'll never happen, but when let's say he enters, he's going to Revolution against Bandito, a match which I don't think any of us are doubting is going to be excellent, but Bandito hasn't crossed into that upper upper echelon? What if, Andrade enters an environment where this is where he's at, where he's fighting all of these guys on Bandito's level? How happy is he going to stay then when he's no longer a tippy top guy and when instead he's being downcycled, I guess, for lack of a better word? What happens to him when he did that, when that happens? Because again, like, this is a guy who can't leave a promotion without who can't leave a promotion on good terms. That's just the history of Andrade. Apparently, he did leave AEW on good terms because he was welcomed back the minute that he was fired or released from WWE. He was welcomed back with open arms, like he's being pushed. So clearly, there's no real bad blood. But so the question that I have, and he left WWE on bad terms. So the question that I have is, is this truly a new Andrade, or are we going to fall back eventually into the Andrade that we've seen multiple times in the past, with the vague posting on Twitter and the frustrations and whatnot, when things don't exactly go his way? Because he has a very set vision of himself, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important to have a vision of yourself that you can push forward, and that you want to convey, right? That's essential, especially in a business like pro wrestling. I think it's absolutely crucial. But he does have a set vision for as himself as a top guy, ultimately, right? As a tippy top guy. What happens if he doesn't reach that level? What happens if he doesn't hit those highs? And that's going to be the ultimate test. And maybe he does hit those highs and we never have this conversation ever again. Maybe he does. Maybe this is the run that unlocks Andrade as a true top guy in pro wrestling. But then again, I don't know. But if he keeps wrestling like he's been doing, and at the New Beginning in USA show, I mean, all of his chances are on his side. But ultimately, the question I was asking is, can he change his stripes? And I would like to think that maybe the man has changed, which is possible. He's been through a lot, and maybe he's just realizing at this stage, it's like, look, I've only got one more place to go. I've only got, like, if I want to make real big time money, wrestle on TV, be a star, there's one more place to go. Because never say never with WWE, but that door is firmly closed. Like, Andrade can't suddenly go on a spree by the end of the year to try and get himself to be rehired in World Wrestling Entertainment. That's just not going to work. So maybe this is a guy who also realizes that, hey, you know what? I can't spread myself too thin here. I can't be bouncing around everywhere. I got to be careful with what my next moves are, and maybe this is maybe the best that it's going to get for me. Might as well make the most out of it. Maybe it's hard to say. It's hard to say because I'm sure he's thrilled to be able to wrestle in Japan again. Don't get me wrong, but I'm sure we all realize that. I'm sure we all realize that the money he's making with AEW far surpasses anything that New Japan would be paying him, or CMLL for that matter, if we wanted to go down that route. So there we go. So that's essentially where we're at right now with Andrade, who again I thought was excellent in this show. On this match. On this show, in this match, I thought he was excellent. I truly think he was fantastic, and so was Yota Tsuji. Tsuji, once again, showing that he's got the stature and the chops to be the guy, to be the top guy of this new era of pro wrestling in New Japan. And look, he takes this. Let me put this this way. He takes his role as a locker room leader very, very seriously. It's something, it's not just something that he tries to put over just to get some brownie points with the hardcore New Japan fans. When he talks about how he wants to protect New Japan, he wants to make New Japan great. He wants to protect it from AEW and stuff like that. It's not just pandering to the hardcore New Japan crowd who do feel that way, right? And ergo score brownie points with them. But he also sincerely believes that, and he's putting it into practice backstage. There's stuff that I've heard where he's stepped up to stick up for the locker room. He positions himself. He says that he wants to be a locker room leader, and he is actually putting his money where his mouth is, and he wants to become that guy who will give direction and unify and stick up for the locker room in these circumstances. He's heading in that direction. Like of all of the up and comers, of all of the this next generation of dudes that we've all been clamoring for years at this point for New Japan to do something with, he's the guy who really has risen above and has decided to take that spot. It started with the whole, if you ask me, it started with the whole thing when with Okada and his rumors with the rumors that started up that he was leaving New Japan, and that Okada didn't want to work with any of the young guys and didn't want to put anyone over, and Tsuji took offense to that, and so on and so forth. It all started there, but he's really adopted that mantle with with all of the older guys just being either downcycled or just gone from the company. It's very natural for someone like him to rise up and insert themselves into that spot and become that guy. And I think the confidence that he's been showing for the past year or so is really coming across. I've noted multiple times that there's something in his wrestling style that's changed. Like, you feel like he's biting more into it, like he's playing his crowd connection a lot more than he has. It feels like Yota Tsuji is much more grounded into, or at least understands who he is in ring a lot more than in previous years, which I always thought was a little something that was missing. In this circumstance here, you're really feeling like now he's sort of turning into a total package. Now when it's time to turn up for the big matches, he turns up. He's not going to be just a vibes guy. Like I wondered if that was going to be his lot, because I didn't see any progression, any evolution. But since last year, we've seen a completely different Yota Tsuji, a guy who turns it on when it's time to deliver, who is much more confident, who gives off a lot more of that presence and that aura, for use of a term which I feel is over abused these days, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. And it came across in this match as well. He played a lot to the American crowd. Like, he understood. He did things in this match to get the crowd invested into it, because there was a bit of a lull at some point, just a little lull, but they were working a 25-minute match, so they're building slowly towards it, and out of fear to lose the crowd, Yota Tsuji would do some things. He'd connect with the crowd, he'd get the crowd to react, to cheer him on, to wake them up. And that's not necessarily something that he does all that much in Japan, because the crowds are different. Here, it shows to me like he has the understanding that the international crowd, if we come here to the United States, well, you can pander to the crowd a lot more, and in very direct ways, maybe in ways that are very different in Japan, where there's a lot more poise, I guess. Nonetheless, the point that I'm trying to make here by saying this is that I feel like he has a better control, a better understanding of how things go down in a ring, and especially in a guy in his position right now, who is at the top of the company. So all the eyes turn to him. He's going to be associated as to whether or not this is a good period business wise or not. We're all going to look to him first and foremost. So he understands what he's into clearly, and he understands the role that he needs to play and that he wants to play. So it's all good stuff. And it translated really well in this match. And of course, I thought he was excellent in this match. I really loved this main event. It's a 4.25 star match type of deal for me. A match that has two guys on similar paths, both guys trying to position themselves and jockey into position to be considered, to be viewed, perceived as top guys. One who literally is in that position, has been thrust into that position, so he has to live up to that. And the other guy is working towards that, who finally sees this environment as his opportunity to really be perceived as a top guy in pro wrestling, not just like, oh, it's Andrade, he's nice, but he never cracked the ceiling. He wants to crack the ceiling, wants to get up there. So, and it showed, and I thought it was a really excellent match, and I highly suggest you go and check that out. I thought it finished the show off really well. Even Yota Tsuji finishing off the show with the demonstration of his English, which was surprisingly good for a Japanese native who, as far as I know, never really spent any time in any English-speaking countries, right? He never really spent any extended time in the UK or in the United States, Canada, but and he just turns up and he cuts a nice promo in English, and I'm very impressed with his English skills. Now, let's be clear here. I'm not suddenly saying, put him on the mic for 8 minutes against MJF. That's not what we're doing here. But again, for a guy who's never really spent any time in an English speaking country, I thought his English was very good. I thought it was very good. So good for him. I thought it was a nice little surprise at the end, and I think the crowd was surprised as well, was enamored about it. It was good. Good main event, good vibes, good feelings, and I think the right man won. I didn't really talk about this, but I think the right man won. I know there's a lot of people who seem excited to get the title off of Tsuji, to get the global title off so that he can only focus on being the IWGP champion. But was this really the time to take a title off Tsuji? No, I don't think so. And I like this idea. I don't think anyone should be in any rush to get these two titles, to get one of the two titles at the very least off of Yota Tsuji, and in this case, the global one. I don't think anyone should be in a rush. Tsuji said it clearly. I will gladly defend this global title outside of New Japan, but I am not defending the IWGP title outside of Japan. I think that's what I said, New Japan, but it's Japan. He said the IWGP title I defend in Japan. Outside, I'll be defending the global, right? And that's a good purpose to give to both. And it's a great way to get Yota Tsuji on a card in the US or wherever, and to defend the title without it being the IWGP title and without creating some awkwardness around it, right? Where you bring in Yota Tsuji. Let's say he didn't have the global title. Just bear with me here in this hypothetical to illustrate my point. Let's say he doesn't have the global title, and he comes to New Japan he comes to the New Beginning in USA show, and he wrestles Andrade, but it's not for the IWGP World Championship because we're only defending that in Japan. Doesn't that seem kind of, it feels a little awkward now. Now it feels a little strange. You're like, wait, why exactly is he not sticking up? Why is he not defending the title? Well, he said he'd only defend it in Japan. So why come to the US show to wrestle in the first place. You know what I mean? Like in a pure wrestling promoting sense, it's a little awkward to get the reasoning across. Whereas with the global title, if he has the global title at the same time, then he can go anywhere. And he's like, yeah, I'll defend a title, defend my global title. So I'm not in any rush to see Huge Suge drop the global title in any way, shape, or form. I guess it would have made sense for Andrade to win it. I would have probably even leaned that way, considering that he's also a member of the New Japan roster. It's not that big a deal. And he shows up on Dynamite, and it's another, another Don Callis guy with a championship, and it's like, it's from a partner promotion. Everyone's okay with that, but it didn't turn out that way, and that's fine. And I think we've completely exhausted my thoughts here on the main event. Let's move on to talk about another excellent match on the show that I really liked. IWGP Women's title match. The champion Shuri successfully defended her title against Athena. And look, I'm going to be straight up with this. This is Athena's best match that I have seen in a long time. And I've obviously seen everything that she's done in AEW. I've seen every Ring of Honor show that she's been on. This was excellent work from Athena. I was done watching this match, and my assessment was, why doesn't Athena work like this all the time? Why does she feel like she has to indulge in these 25 to 30 minute matches where she's doing all sorts of stuff that doesn't really connect, that doesn't, metaphorically and realistically sometimes, doing all of her goofy stuff. And why doesn't she look? She's wrestling Shuri, who is as no nonsense a wrestler out there as you can find. Shuri gets in there. She wrestles a very deliberate style, very particular. She will pick you apart. She will kick the piss out of you. She's a wrestler's wrestler, right? This is someone who had excellent matches with Suri, which is another like a high tier, high quality pro wrestler that you're like, get ready to do something that feels real and looks real. So when they start wrestling Shuri and Athena, when they start the match and Shuri is doing the grappling, right? She's breaking her down, she's twisting her up, and Athena's responding really well. Like she's got snap to what she's doing. Her float overs are great. And I'm sitting there and going, Shuri is bringing out something in Athena that we're not used to see. And this fucking rules, right? You keep hearing over and over that, Athena loves wrestling in Japan. She loves the Joshi style, and how much she respects it and whatnot. And then you turn around and you get, like I said, these overindulgent 25, 30 minute main events on Ring of Honor pay-per-views that, you could say, look, this is a 15-minute match. You scratch half of the time on this match and you get yourself a nice, tight little production here. Like sometimes I find she has very bad instincts. But in this circumstance here, and again, like, I don't know exactly how they went over the match, how they decided to do this, but she was absolutely phenomenal. I thought Athena in this match was exactly what Athena should be, with minimal dumb stuff and her talking too much and doing all of her goofy shtick. Like if I do have a major criticism of this match is Athena, and I've criticized this before about Athena, her fucking, kick out faces, right? When she pins a wrestler and they kick out and then she does the NXT face. You know what I'm talking about. She does it so often and she does it at every pin. And I'm like, brother, or in this case, sister, that sounds a little weirder for some reason. You can't be shocked for 15 seconds at every fucking pinfall that Shuri kicks out. You can't. That doesn't work. And there's instances where there's these sequences at some point. There's these sequences in this match, particularly one where she's caught up in an armbar, right? And she's power bombing Shuri over and over and over again to try to get to break the move, and then she covers her. Like it's a really big sequence where Shuri has her locked. She has her locked up, and Athena's struggling to get out. So she does the 3 power bombs and she covers Shuri, and Shuri kicks out. And then she does one of these to the camera, to the audience. And I'm like, no, stay on her. Stay on her. What are you doing? Instead of like, you were actually building momentum here. I was like, the audience could feel it. Everyone could feel it. And what you decide to do after the pinfall is slap your cheeks and go, and then count and then do this with your fingers. 1, 2, 3, and then look at the ref and you're like, could you imagine fucking Harley Race doing that? It doesn't make sense. Stay on her then. She kicked out of the 3 power bombs. She's got to be exhausted. Do some other cool shit. Continue building this moment. That's my main criticism of this match. It's just, I wish Athena could tone that down. But like, if anything, it's a quibble. Maybe a bigger quibble than my usual quibbles. It may be bigger, but like, because it irks me so much. It just gets to me so much. I wish he didn't do that. But like for the rest, for everything that happened in this match, she was so good, and she showed how talented and skillful she is. How I look, I don't know if it's her, if it's wrestling the Joshi girls that brings this out of her, but she was so incredibly tight and snappy and smooth and just focused on grappling and hurting and moves, and she was great. I was absolutely thrilled watching this Athena match, and then coming on to this review without having to say, well, here she goes again, type of thing. And this is her pattern. Like, if anyone is listening to this who can send this over to Athena, just, like, this is what she should be doing moving forward. And I don't believe that the American crowd would not get behind this. Let's not forget, right? Because I'm trying to say too many things at once. I don't think it's a problem for the American audience to get behind this. Sometimes I feel like she feels she has to revert to doing more sports entertaining stuff because it's American pro wrestling audiences, and she's afraid if she doesn't do it, she's not going to get herself over. But not only do I think that this match here and the reactions that she was getting from the audience is proof of the opposite, but we can also go back to how Athena's massively successful Ring of Honor run started when she stiffed the fuck out of Jody Threat. She wasn't clowning around. She wasn't doing goofy shit. She was just coming in there to beat the shit out of this woman. And she did. And that's what got Athena over. Of course, it created the side discussion of, she's unsafe. But you'll notice no one ever talks about that now. That discussion's been forgotten because no one gives it, because it was a bubble thing, something to look for criticism about, instead of looking at what was happening is like, no, this is actually really cool and good for Athena. It got her over. You can argue that the 1,000+ forever champ reign, 1,000+ day forever champ reign thing is the thing that's getting her over. But no, I think even at this point, it's kind of a detriment to her. I think matches like this is what gets her over. I think if we saw more of this Athena, She would get herself over big time. And again, look, maybe it's a question of partner, right? Maybe it's your dance partner. Look, we know this kind of stuff happens in pro wrestling. Sometimes it just depends on your dance partner, whether something is great or whether something sucks. That is something that can happen, right? And Shuri is excellent. She is one of the most consistently excellent professional wrestlers in Japan, dare I say on the planet. She's every time. So if wrestling with Shuri brought this out of her, then maybe hang on to that. Maybe not just discard it and say, oh, this is a one and done thing. There's something there. And I want to believe that Athena is great. I want to. And I think when you see matches like this, you're like, she has the stuff. But 30-minute matches against, or 25, 30-minute matches, I don't remember exactly how long, against Persephone, where for practically half of the match, you're like, man, is this thing over yet? Like, that's not the way to go. That's not how she defines herself as an exciting wrestler. It's not going 25 minutes with Billy Starks either. Like, is she hungry to wrestle to wrestle like the top women in the world right now, as opposed to just the developmental people in Ring of Honor? I would probably say she is. She has a long career. She's had a long career at this point. She's like, why? If she is in a position where she's like, look, I'm done wrestling the developmental people, then start wrestling. Stop relying on the goofy stuff and do what clearly you are able to do on a very high level. I'm extremely thrilled about this match. I didn't know exactly what to expect. I was like, how much shtick are we going to get out of Athena here? And we didn't get any outside of the fucking goofy faces, but the kick out faces where I'm like, now this is too much. It was a tight, hard hitting, convincing professional wrestling match that had minimal theatrics and everyone benefited. It made the match really good. It did, no gobbledygook that ended up hurting the flow of the match. Best Athena match in a long. When I'm trying to think back, maybe her Willow match, because that was really awesome. When's the truly last? I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but the last truly great Athena match, and it's not some of her recent offerings off of the Ring of Honor pay-per-views. They have not. Might be going on to 2 years at this point, maybe 18 months. I'd have to. Well, why don't I take a look? Look, I can pull up her recent history here. Yeah, look, I pulled up her stuff here. Look, like I said, it's not the Persephone match, right? It's not the Persephone match. I didn't see her. It wasn't the Mina Shirakawa match either. It wasn't the Thunder Rosa match either from Supercard of Honor 2025. There's an Athena Alex Windsor match from Australia that last year that I don't remember. I don't recall. Maybe I didn't. There's a fair chance I didn't see it. It's not the Billy Starks match from Final Battle. Look, we're going back. It's not Red Velvet at Battle of the Belts 10 in 2024. We're going back a while, folks, before we truly had a great one. Before we really, really had a great one. I know a lot of people like the Hikaru Shida match. I thought it was really good. Was it great? We're going back a while here. Look, I'm not going to go through the entire catalog here, but the point is that it's been a real long time since Athena has had a significantly great match. Like a truly great match. In this circumstance, and I might be I've been focusing a lot on the Ring of Honor matches, but let's say we talk about the stuff that she did with in AEW. Oh, she did have that really great match against Mercedes Moné at in the Owen Cup last year. Yeah, last year. That's one that just slipped my mind, but I agree. Like that one was truly excellent. Tony Storm Athena at Forbidden Door was fine. It was good, but just that's about it. There was nothing to write home about. So yeah, it's like that's how I've been. So, that's how long I think it's been since the last time she had a truly excellent match. And again, she's wrestling Mercedes Moné. Again, another high tier, all-time great pro wrestler along the same vibes as Shuri. Maybe wrestling these high-level wrestlers brings the best out of her, which is fine. But, you got to be able to hang on to something and apply it to your own craft, right? Anyway, look, I think I've talked enough about it. And one last thing, I think Shuri wants to work as many American dates as possible. They wanted AEW and Shuri wanted to have a little tete-a-tete last year. We were angling to have some Shuri in AEW, but unfortunately she got injured, so that derailed some plans. But I think Shuri kind of realizes, she's getting up there in age. Like she's not far cry from being washed, but she's pushing 40 more than the opposite. I think she sees how the tides are turning in Stardom as well, which is focusing a lot on the younger acts. She might be someone who's like, look, if I'm about to transition into another part of my career, might as well try to go do this in the United States where the physical toll isn't as intense, so I can extend some years into my career as a wrestler and get paid more in the meantime. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more Shuri showing up on American television. And the other excellent match that I want to talk about is the New Japan Strong Openweight Championship, where Boltin Oleg defeated Tomohiro Ishii to become champ. His first match on U.S. soil, becomes a champion, wins the belt that everyone sort of shrugs at. It's like, oh, it's the open weight title. Who cares, right? But this match ruled. Like this is what I said. This is what I was talking about earlier earlier in the review, when I was saying, if you're looking to these shows to get like a New Japan experience, well, this was it here. Boltin Oleg and Tomohiro Ishii just beating each other up and dropping each other on their heads and having just an unnecessarily awesome chop exchange on top of that. I don't know what else you could have wanted out of this fight. It was excellent. It was great. And the crowd loves Ishii, right? Who is 50 years old and is still one of the greatest wrestlers out there. Like without even question. It's not even, there's no sign of this guy slowing down. There's no sign of this guy going, well, it's time to downcycle him, right? Where other contemporaries of his were much more broken down than him. This guy has been such a stalwart fucking worker, excellent at everything he's ever done for the vast majority of his career. He's 50 years old and he is still going as hard. Absolutely remarkable stuff. Boltin Oleg is so okay. So the audience, yeah, this is the point I was making. Sorry about that. So Ishii comes in and the audience loves him because it's Tomohiro Ishii, and Boltin Oleg essentially won this crowd over by the end because they were like, oh yes, the guy with the big furry hat, yay, type of thing. Everyone's we like him, but we don't like him. But by the end of the match, everyone was like, fuck yeah, big chance for Boltin Oleg. And I mean, how could you not win the crowd over with such a solid, powerful, performance standing up to a guy who, in the minds of a lot of professional wrestling fans, and Ishii is an immovable force, just like this juggernaut, this force of nature, right? Just an absolute brutal fight with two guys just battering each other into exhaustion. Oleg wins with his F5. What does he call it? The Supreme Justice. What does he call it? He calls it it's the victory, victory justice. It's an F5, right? Wins with no, he doesn't win with the F5. He wins with this kamikaze deal, but he did the FI as the F. He did the F5. Christ, he did the F5 as a setup to the kamikaze, and no, it was just fantastic. It was an absolutely great match to kick. I don't have many more notes than that, other than I myself catch myself sometimes when I'm talking about the young guys and the new guys coming up in New Japan and whatnot. And oftentimes I will leave Bolt and Oleg out of the conversation because I just don't think about him because he's not positioned that way. He's not positioned as a guy that you really should see as being an integral part of the future of the company. But, then he gets into the ring and like, this was right up his alley. This is his specialty. And he just tears the house down. And you're like, no, I feel bad to oftentimes, most of the time, leave him out of the conversation when we're talking about guys who could step up and be meaningful for the company. I think they still have something there with Bolt and Oleg. As a top guy, I don't think so. Maybe not as a tippy top guy in the company, because I think he lacks in a couple of areas. I don't think his crowd connection is particularly strong, and I think charisma is not his forte. Let's put it that way. But he does a lot of his talking when it comes to beating the piss out of people as well. So, and he might grow into something, right? It's all a question of confidence. You always feel like Oleg is. You always feel like he's in learning mode. You never feel like he's really authoritative in what he's doing. I wouldn't call it hesitancy, but just not quite as confident as he could allow himself to be. So that's where I'm at with him, and this match was excellent, like a 4-star match. Just great stuff. And why don't we then blow through the rest of the card again? The rest I don't necessarily have. A couple of exceptions aside, I don't have much to add. But Show opened up with David Finlay defeating Fred Rosser in a match that everyone sort of thought that this was going to be David Finlay's. Farewell to New Japan in the U.S. But listen, he picks up the mic at the end to sort of give the impression that he's going to talk. And he doesn't. He just drops the mic and walks away. And then he's greeted by the Knockout Brothers, who are War Dogs, and they do the War Dog thing. And doesn't look like a goodbye. There's no hugging. There's nothing sentimental. It didn't come across as a goodbye. And then when you add to that the reports, the stuff that's been going around saying that he's had an offer on the table from WWE, but the offer that they have is more around the lines of being a player coach in NXT as opposed to top guy, so the money might not be exactly there. And he also has an offer tabled by New Japan, who would gladly take him back. And there's a lot of rumors circulating that is exactly what might happen, because there's no interest from AEW. If there is interest, it has been minimal and silent, or both, right? But also all signs point to AEW just shrugging and going, nah, maybe not. So, look, good for him. He went out there and tested free agency, and the market for him right now is not excited. And he just might end up going back to New Japan, and they might try something different with him. I right now, this seems like the most plausible scenario. I don't think he's going anywhere else. I don't think he's going to be accepting WWE's offer. AEW doesn't seem to be any interest. Why would he want to go to TNA? I think he'll just be better off heading back to Japan, to New Japan, and doing this. Or, he might do things in Japan as a freelancer there as well. He might just pop in for a few dates in New Japan and go work in other places as well. The guy tested it out. He tried it out. You can't blame him. It didn't quite work out for him. He realized that the thirst for David Finlay isn't as pronounced as he probably had hoped. So we'll see what his next step is. But there's nothing on the show that demonstrated to me that Dave Finlay is leaving New Japan. Au contraire, it added a bit of doubt. Look, he beat Fred Rosser in a very, very, very normal pro wrestling match, right? A very fine professional wrestling match wrestled by professional wrestlers. You know what I'm putting down? And I even thought the end was a little sloppy on top of that. I thought the overkill move, it didn't look great. Like there was a lot of slop here at the same time. But, I'm going to be gracious here because both guys worked hard and it was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It was fine. But if you're if you're leaving the company, do you put over Fred Rosser? I mean, there's also that, people, it's like, oh, it's this huge sign. Well, I mean, it's a sign. I don't know if it's a huge sign. It's like, look, you're putting over Fred Rosser if you lose, right? Why would you let's say you are leaving the company. What's the benefit in putting Fred Rosser over? And again, no disrespect. It's just Fred Rosser is he's no one in New Japan as a wrestler, right? As a talent, as an on-screen talent. I know he does work with the LA Dojo and that's fine. He's got that. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about it as an on-air talent. He's no one. It's nothing. So who cares if he puts him over on his way out or not? It's not as if we're suddenly creating a star here. And then it's Dave Finlay at the same time. So it's like, this ain't Jay White putting over Dave Finlay. Let's put it that way. I could see it go both ways. Of course I'm leaning more into Dave Finlay staying because he won this match. But I could also see him leaving the company and having beaten Fred Rosser because who cares? Because there's no reason to put Fred Rosser over. Now, let's say this last match had been against Ryohei Oiwa. Well, then you're like, well, of course he's going to put Oiwa over because Oiwa is a guy that they see has a future in the company as being a guy, so they want him to go over, of course. Not the case with Fred Rosser. You know what I mean? Anyway. I don't think it's that big a sign, but it does throw enough doubt. It's more like a 50-50 type of situation now as to whatever the fuck he's going to do. Let's talk about, then we had the Boltin Oleg Tomohiro Ishii match. Ricochet successfully retained the national title against Taiji Ishimori. It was fine. It was good. It was a good little match. I gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, maybe I'm overdoing it, but I thought the work was very solid. I don't think we were getting full effort Taiji Ishimori, which is fine too. It's all right. If anything, I thought this match was a little long. And this is a problem that I had with a couple of matches here on the undercard or the mid card where you had this is definitely a match which I think could have benefited from just being a little shorter. But, nonetheless, a 3.5 star match. El Desperado and Kushida defeated Alec Price and Jordan Oliver. It was all right. Alec Price, holy smokes. I think they upped his Vyvanse dose. He was, he was bouncing off the walls, wasn't he? It was all right. It was well worked. Nothing to it, but I felt it was I thought it was very disjointed as a match goes. And felt like no one was really able to get on the same page. I felt like they really struggled with cohesion and whatnot. It wasn't a complete disaster. It's not like something that fell apart, but and there was some really cool stuff that happened in the match, but I felt like they really struggled to bring it all together. It's a 3.25 star match for me, I guess. It just was really, really difficult, I find, for everyone to find their footing in this match. Konosuke Takeshita successfully defeated El Fantasma to become the new New Japan Pro Wrestling World Television Champion. They technically had 2 matches. They had the first match that went to the full 15-minute time limit. And then after the match, El Fantasma got on the mic and said, hey, how about 5 more minutes? And the crowd was into it, and they did it. Wrestlers have the power to book their own matches, apparently. I'm not necessarily a fan of that, where he was just basically, okay, let's do it. Like, no officials around, nothing. I don't know. I don't know why. Here's the thing. I thought the match itself, the 15-minute draw, was a bit of a slog. I thought it was. I thought I had trouble getting into it. I was like, what's going on here? This is Konosuke Takeshita, who is one of my favorite pro wrestlers on earth right now. And I was like, he's better than this. What is going on? What's the deal? And then we get towards the final few minutes of that match, and things are really starting to pick up as the time limit becomes a thing, and the guys really start working, and ELP is sequencing a whole bunch of stuff together. Of course, earlier in the match, he does that great moonsault off of the top turnbuckle all the way to the outside of the floor. That was fantastic. Just an absolutely mind-blowing spot. But as it stands, I don't know. I don't know what to do with the entirety of the matches. Like, it really did drag. And when you look at how everything was laid out, it's like, oh, it dragged because they really wanted to build the last few minutes so that people would get excited for an extra 5 minutes and then really like blow up. But then they, unfortunately, it sacrificed like the majority of the regular 15 minutes to this, right? But look, it worked for the live crowd. The live crowd was into it. They were into the extra 5 minutes. They didn't want to see another time limit draw. And when they hit the time limit draw, I was like, wait, is this the story they're trying to tell with Takeshita? Is that he can't beat anyone within the time limit moving forward? Is this the thing? Is that he needs like these long extended periods to get the job done? 20 minutes is not enough type of thing. 15 minutes is not enough. Is that? But thankfully, no, that's not the story that we're telling, because that would have been a little weird. I don't know. I thought this match dragged. This is another match that, and I know it's a set amount of time, but you could have decided to just have Takeshita win without the time limit draw stuff, and it would have made for a better match overall, I think, because you would have cut out you could have done the exact same sequences. The 3 minutes or whatever that was added at the end, you could have put that in the 15-minute time limit and have a really exciting, like 4 to 5 minutes final sequence of just like great stuff. You could have had that too, and that would have elevated everything. I think the match would have been better. I don't know why we had to go to the draw. I don't know. Was this to protect ELP? Why would you want to protect ELP at this point either? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what any of this was about. But Takeshita wins, and it's a good little title for him too. He's still under contract there, so he can pop in and do a TV defense, a TV title defense once in a while. Just show up and do one of those and go home, and that's fine. He doesn't have to be involved in these long drawn out stories either. So it's good stuff. Yeah, good little championship, but a very mixed bag as far as the match goes. And then the Knockout Brothers successfully retained the IWGP Tag Team titles against the Gates of Agony. This was my least favorite match of the night. This is like a 3-star, a gentleman's 3. This is a match that really went on too long. This is a match that not only we missed the peak, but I wonder what the peak was. And it's weird because, look, is it a question of inexperience, right? I have a tendency to chalk it up to that. Like my gut would say this is a question of just inexperience, with the Knockout Brothers. I think Asuka is still, I don't think Asuka is a finished product. Not as much as Yuto Ice is. Asuka is still very green. I think he's still searching for himself. I don't know if Cowboy Undertaker is his final form. And I feel like he's still green in the ring. Whereas but nonetheless, like these guys have been wrestling, like they did their entire excursion together. You'd think that they'd have more chemistry, but then again, it's, I kind of look at them wrestling in New Japan and the great matches that they've had, against Shota Umino and Yuya Uemura, against Taiji and Tomohiro Ishii. I'm like, these guys know how to work. This isn't the question. Is it working in front of a different crowd with different sensibilities? I don't know. Is it working with the Gates of Agony, who, have a tendency to work a very American style of match? We saw it a few weeks ago when they were in CMLL on a Friday night, and they wrestled a very American tag style match that was very off-putting in a lucha environment. So is this the kind of thing here too? I don't think the differences are all that. I don't think the differences in tag team wrestling are as stark between the US and Japan than they are between the US and Mexico. But maybe there's some of that. And again, like I'm thinking inexperience. Well, Leona and Khan have been wrestling as a tag team for a long time as well at this point. You'd kind of figure, they'd figure things out. To no surprise, when Yuto Ice and Toa Leona got at it in this match, I perked up and it was very, very good. These are clearly both of those guys are the highlights of their respective teams. I don't know. It's weird to me that Gates of Agony is the traveling team from AEW that goes off and does stuff, right? In Mexico, wrestle with Japanese wrestlers, and in Japan and whatnot. When they're very basic and always seem to force a style of tag team wrestling that doesn't always jive with the environment they're in or the wrestlers that they're up against. I don't know. I have trouble putting my finger on it because I like this team in AEW. In AEW, I think they're very good. And then transitioned into these environments, and I don't know. Is it because they're just losing their bearings or whatnot? I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. You'd think that since this is the team that travels the most, they'd pick up things and they'd adapt, they'd try stuff out. But is it them that are set in their way? I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. But look, Toa Leona, Yuto Ice, both shined in this match because they're both great. And other than that, it's like, I thought it was too long, didn't have any heat. I think this was a crowd that didn't want to see. I think this is a crowd that wasn't particularly into an American style tag team match either. Anyway, it under delivered. It was a gentleman's 3 because it was well worked, but there was just no substance. There was no heat to it. There wasn't any juice on the bone. Well, there you go. We're gonna that about wraps it up. So listen, for the review, quick recap. If you don't have much time to spare, you've got 3 matches to watch on this card. the Yota Tsuji Andrade match, the Shuri Athena match, and the Bolton Oleg Tomohiro Ishii match. Those are the three that you have to focus on. If you want to watch the rest of the card, you won't hate it. There will be moments where you're like, this is a little soft. It's a little soft in the middle. It's a little soft around the midsection. And I know what I'm talking about in that circumstance. But a good show nonetheless. It's a good show, solid, nothing terrible, but truly had some outstanding, excellent moments, and enough for this show to be regarded as a good one. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. A lot of WWE talk tonight, folks, but what do you want from me? AEW, be exciting. AEW is exciting. The product is very good. The promo, it's been excellent. It's been so much fun. It's just all these news items happening, like this one here, which we're going to read here from an article from Josh Nason over there on the Figure 4 Online. TKO head Mark Shapiro is very excited about the day when ESPN Unlimited is fully authenticated for subscribers of all major cable and streaming providers, giving them free access to WWE premium live events. Shapiro also spoke Monday at the annual Morgan Stanley Technology, Media, and Telecom Conference. That sounds like a blast. Where he was asked about the ESPN WWE relationship following their PLE shift last September and how it might impact both reach and popularity. He said, "It definitely impacts us." I don't know why I gave myself a little weird accent there. It does. Mark Shapiro, it's fine. "It definitely impacts us." And noted they were asked all the same questions about accessibility when WWE moved to Peacock years ago. "Moving to Peacock was a total success," he said. "We play the long game with WWE, and we're doing the same with ESPN." Are you now? I'm pretty sure ESPN isn't necessarily happy to hear about that when they were expecting an influx of new subscribers to their brand new platform launched last summer. I don't think they were interested in the long game as much as they were in short-term returns. He then put over the ESPN platform, calling it a phenomenal package if you're a sports fan. Sounds like something I'd say. And added that things will immediately get better for WWE when Comcast, YouTube, and Dish all allow their subscribers to authenticate and get the service for free. Comcast Xfinity actually launched that capability last weekend, while it might be until fall for YouTube. So why would it get better then for WWE? Why would it be better? I'm glad you asked. Shapiro explains. That is the $29.99 monthly cost without authenticating, I believe, is somewhat prohibitive, especially in today's economy and the struggles that certainly middle income and low income earners are having with affordability. They have to get those deals done. Until they do, that will affect our audience, he said, adding that they are excited about everything getting done. We'll give me a second here. We'll circle back to this. Shapiro said that for this past weekend's Elimination Chamber, they saw a significant increase in audience from last September's WrestlePalooza and are already making strides. All right. He admitted that they aren't where they were a year ago with Netflix or Peacock, but he was super encouraged by the numbers WWE President Nick Khan was sending him every hour this past weekend. Then he talks about Paramount and Warner Bros. And, the rest is kind of, it doesn't matter. This is the quote that matters here. The quote about, the $30 might be a little cost prohibitive. That's fucking rich. Coming from this guy and this company who were going around not all long ago saying, hey, Vince McMahon used to price these tickets for families, and we think there's more money to squeeze out of these rubes. That's not what they said, but that's what it meant, right? And since that time, right? Since this time, ever since they sort of established this idea that they weren't charging more for their tickets, ticket prices have been going up and pricing people out, like legitimately far out of the market, like in incomprehensible ways. So that is so for him to sit down and say, yeah, you know what, the $30 a month, that might be a little cost prohibitive. You know why he's saying that? You know why he's saying that, as opposed to anything else that they do. It's because he didn't set the price point for the ESPN subscription. He's like, you know what? I think our partners might be pricing people out here. Imagine the fucking gall. Like, let's be completely honest here. Okay? This is what you have to see in this circumstance. You read all of this, you read these quotes. The only takeaway you can have, I believe, the only possible takeaway you can have is that ESPN is currently not happy with the amount of subscribers that they're getting for their ESPN Unlimited gimmick through WWE. And probably even the viewership might be a little down. Maybe not hitting the targets that they had expected. This is the takeaway you have to that you have to glean here by talking about, listen, it's a phenomenal package if you're a sports fan, right? And things will get better once ESPN finally sign some agreements with Comcast, YouTube, and Dish, which are the outliers, right? Because if you recall, last summer they launched the service, the ESPN Unlimited thing, and they said, oh, it's going to be included in your cable package if you're a subscriber, but most major American providers weren't even offering ESPN Unlimited, and they hadn't even come to an agreement with ESPN on that front. So they've been signing a few. The article says here that Comcast Infinity had settled up, but you've got YouTube and Dish who are still outliers there. So and then he turns around and he says, yeah, it would probably be a lot better for our fans if it wasn't $30, which again, he's criticizing the price for the service, a price that he didn't set, that his partners are saying. So if on one hand you're saying, oh, well, more people will watch WWE once ESPN finalizes the deals with the other, cable operators, so to speak. And, it probably would be better if ESPN wasn't charging $30. These are not necessarily positive things you're saying in regards to your media partner. This does not sound good. I 100% believe that this is a little public airing of grievances here, where there's probably been meetings, calls, whatever, emails, signal messages, in regards to from ESPN to WWE going, yeah, we gave you motherfuckers a whole lot of money and we're not seeing the numbers that you promised. And this is a little damage control here. This is Shapiro saying, well, yeah, like he's not outright lying and saying our numbers are great. He's not even saying that. He's saying, look, our numbers could be better, but ESPN has to get its act together and settle up agreements with the other cable operators. And, if they weren't selling at $30, then maybe people would be more inclined to subscribe if it wasn't $30 a month. Holy shit. Like, that's what he's saying here. So, folks, the takeaway you have to read out of this is that not everything is milk and cookies with WWE and ESPN these days. And I don't think this should come to a shock to anyone, because no numbers have ever been touted. No success has ever been touted in regards to the number of subscribers, the amount of hours watched, so on and so on. Nothing. I think ESPN might be having buyer's regret. And look, Shapiro says himself, he admitted they weren't there. We aren't where we were a year ago with Netflix and Peacock. That's bonkers. It's nuts. He's outright saying, yeah, you know, we could have better numbers. We could have had better numbers, but, you know, we're super encouraged. Oh, and this is another thing. But, you know, I'm super encouraged by the numbers Nick Khan was sending him every hour this past weekend. Now, having dabbled a tiny bit into the world of television and you know, through video production and live programming and whatnot, I feel rather confident in saying that if an executive, if a president, a vice president is asking you to send hour by hour viewership numbers, hour per hour viewership numbers on on a Saturday night, I don't think you're necessarily confident with what's going on right now. I think you've had a stern talking to from your media partner, and now you're worried and you want to see how things are going. You want to be able to assess the situation as it's going along. Normally, like, remember the structure, right? TKO is the owner, but they don't get involved in the day-to-day operations. They just want the final. They want the numbers, and he just wants the numbers. They just want the spreadsheets, and that's all they're really interested in, right? They don't care about the day-to-day operations. They want the big picture. In this circumstance, Mark Shapiro outright said, "Yeah, the president of I'm asking Nick Khan to send me numbers every hour on how we're performing." That's not a confident president right there. That's not a confident owner, because a confident owner would be like, "That's fine, do your thing." Now he wants to be advised every hour how things are going. Oh, that's not necessarily a good thing. That means he's reacting on the spot. That means he's turning on the TV to see what's going on. He's looking at what's happening, and then he's going to ask some questions. Then he's going to see the number, and he's like, the numbers dipped here while we had this joker jumping off of the cage in the elimination chamber and completely missing a fucking elbow drop. How does that happen? I might be exaggerating, but that's still the intent. Like, if Mark Shapiro feels like he has to get hour to hour data when he should be leaving this in the hands of Nick Khan, that's Nick Khan's job, but he needs Nick Khan to report to him every hour? No, there's something here. There's a high level of uncertitude going on right now. Things are not rosy right now. They're not rosy. They're not good. I think Shapiro feels like I don't want to say persecuted. That's not the right word, but I think Shapiro might feel like he's being challenged by ESPN, who just might not be super excited about how things are going on right now. Why would he be getting hourly numbers from Nick Khan? Makes no sense. A guy like Shapiro should be getting his monthly, his weekly report, whatever, and then go thumbing through the numbers, looking for green arrows pointing up. That's all he wants. He wants to get all of his spreadsheets and all of his graphs and everything in the green with arrows pointing up. That's all he wants to see. No, there's something going on. There's something. Mark Shapiro painted a portrait that things are not necessarily hunky-dory in this relationship between ESPN and WWE. We probably knew that already. We probably felt it, probably saw it coming, but that's where we are right now. Very interesting talk. Very, very interesting talk. So, of course, we're going to add that to the pile. See what comes out of it. Might just be a whole nothing burger as well, but I'd put a pin in this. And that about does it for another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Thank you all very much for being here and for your ongoing support of the show. I will be back, hopefully, next week for another edition of the podcast. But in the meantime, you will definitely be served an AEW Dynamite review tomorrow being Thursday, and I will also be streaming on Thursday evening on the YouTube channel. That's usually what we do on Thursday. So if you're so inclined, come say hello. We would love to have you. Other than all of that, well, listen, we've covered everything. Nothing else to say outside of thank you very much once again for being here. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you next time.